I'm back. If you have not seen my previous videos, my name is Phoenix, aka Mohawk. Sorry for the long hiatus, but I had to do this thing that is, what's it called? Paid work. But today I want to talk about sobriety and kind of the language we use to talk about sobriety and how we frame sobriety. It was basically voted on by the people who follow me on Instagram. It had the highest number of votes. So this is what I'm going to prioritize talking about this particular month. So the main thing I want to talk about is language. And as you can see behind me on the screen, there is like this research journal talking about how, language and addiction and recovery is pretty important. Like it can basically indirectly and in a lot of ways directly contribute to the stigma around drug use, and whether that's like casual or problematic, like in the sense of like chaotic substance use, which, is usually what's referred to as addiction. And I'm not gonna like read this shit behind me. I feel like people, if they care enough, they can kind of look this kind of thing up themselves. I'm gonna just put my 2 cents, give my perspective, and occasionally like have some things up behind me that reinforce what I'm saying, so that you know that I'm not just like talking out of my ass. And it's not even that I necessarily like had to look this stuff up to formulate my opinion. I am part of the harm reduction movement. Like I don't just like push harm reduction and don't know what the fuck is going on in the actual movement itself with the people who are like on the front lines trying to make change. Like I am a harm reductionist. Like it is who I am as a person. It reinforces a lot of my behaviors that influence just about everything that I do in my life. And I'm going to talk about the principles of harm reduction another time, but like maybe I'll just throw them up behind me on the screen so you can kind of see, get an idea of the basis from which we do our work. And that way you can understand why we want to talk more about the language you use to destigmatize the stuff. Like I feel like that's kind of like step one. We've already consumed all this propaganda and like anti-drug rhetoric. So a place to start really is just in how we talk about it. And that goes for people. There's a lot of people who support harm reduction and drug policy reform and all this stuff who use really inappropriate language often, and they're not aware of it. And I'm not demonizing anybody for doing this kind of thing by accident. I'm not just talking about the people who call someone like junkies and crackheads. I'm talking about the people who use the word addict, or who use the word clean, for example. And as harmless as it might seem, it still has these like negative connotations. And also like it in itself, it might be positive, but it implies something negative indirectly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. First, I'm going to put those principles of harm reduction up. One has been added sort of recently. It's not like new in the sense of like, we just figured out that we should add it into the principles. Is kind of something that was already happening, but I guess is important to state. So here are the principles of harm reduction behind me. You can kind of look at it a little bit. I'm not going to read it. This is on the Harm Reduction Coalition's website, which is harmreduction.org. It's on there under their about, like who we are type section. And, I have a whole presentation about harm reduction that I will do, someday. But all of this is covered. And like I said, they added one more, and I believe it's technically number 2. Yeah, number 2 is the one that they added. So I just want to put that out there for the people who might be already aware of, the principles of harm reduction, that they decided to sort of break out something that is often discussed in the field, but may need to be stated for the general public. I shifted in the wrong direction, but yeah, it's here. So you can take a look at these yourself. And I'm going to start talking a little bit more about language that we use when discussing topics of drug use. But basically, this came up recently, and I want to talk about this before I dive into what is sobriety and what defines sobriety. This word is used a lot, and like I said, we're stigmatizing addiction by basically referring to people by using certain language that might seem kosher but is actually kind of harmful. So the reason why that clean is not a great word, and I know that we've been conditioned to use this word because of basically the recovery program, I want to call it the recovery industrial complex, because recovery is a whole shit. It's rooted in weird, religious, moralistic, cultish bullshit that's not science-based or anything. Not knocking anyone that went through a recovery program and were able to get their chaotic drug use under control, or abstain completely from any substance that they had, problematic use issues with. But the recovery program, kind of system that's available, most widely available, like AA and NA, basically, makes these weird assertions about what a quote unquote addict is, and how you're basically an addict forever, and if you're not currently using, you're in remission, and all these things that make it sound like it's a moral failing on the person. You fucked up, and now you're just it's kind of like those jokes, or maybe in some cases real calendars, where it's 47 days without incident, and you just keep marking it, and that's how you view yourself. I haven't touched this thing that I had a problem with for 6 years now, go me. And it's a great accomplishment, but it's as soon as you touch it, even if you don't relapse in the sense of spiraling out of control and back into that very problematic, harmful pattern that you might have had previously, you consider it a failure. You consider it this relapse, and now you've got to start that fucking countdown over, that calendar over, and be back to square one. I slipped up and had a drink, and when you consider yourself clean, what is the opposite of clean? Unclean. Where does this language come from? This purity language come from? And I could just be making some assumptions, but for me, it's very heavily tied to religion, this purity shit, virginity. So yeah, there's this heavy religious association with this type of language and this line of thinking, and it's not as productive as it could be if we just celebrate accomplishments without making it sound like the people who are still using substances of some sort, regardless of whether it's problematic or not, are somehow making poor choices, failing as a person, doing something that's unclean, not kosher, not good. And if you refrain from those activities, you are clean, you are pure, you are good, you are not evil, or anything else like that. If you are a person who has now, recovered from chaotic or problematic substance use, like, that's amazing. I have as well. I never went through any kind of program for it because thankfully I didn't have to get to that point, but I had a lot of friends and, people in my community who have, and I support that they are now free from this problematic drug use pattern and habit, but staying clean stigmatizes people who are still kind of in this phase, this transitional phase of, maybe they're still in the like throes of their addiction, or like on Suboxone or some like maintenance program. Like, there are people who demonize folks who are in recovery because they're using maintenance drugs, which help them have like consistency and be the productive humans they want to be until they have like weaned themselves off of any of the substance. There are people who fucking demonize people in recovery because they already went through that process, and now they think they're better than everybody. They're on this high horse of like, I've recovered and you're a scrub. So like, this type of shit is bullshit. It pisses me off. And you might be thinking, okay, so like, if clean is not a great word to use for my accomplishments, then what do I use? There's so many options, let me tell you. I'm gonna even scroll down on this website. When Healthline is telling you to stop, like, Healthline is a pretty reliable source of information. I, encourage reading any articles that are on this website, as well as Very Well, like the Very Well branch of verticals of health-oriented websites. I've had some friends and colleagues work a lot on that website. They're very harm reduction minded or aligned or oriented. And so like, I find that information to be quite unbiased and well-researched, because it is done by people who are actually very active and involved in the harm reduction movement, and are not coming from a place of, speaking from a place of like having believed propaganda and this and that. So I feel like Healthline is like the second best when it comes to educational resources. So I just wanted to put this up in the background. Like, I don't really need to actually read it, but it's there. It says it on the website as well. You can say sober. You can say drug-free, substance-free, abstinent. All of those work. You could even, if you have like, maybe you used to have a problematic relationship with opioids. Now you don't use any opioids or alcohol or anything that like might resemble the effects of, sedatives, but you just smoke weed, and you are very able to like fulfill your day-to-day responsibilities and not hinder any of your relationships with people while you like regularly use cannabis. So, if you don't want to describe yourself as drug-free or substance-free or something like that, because it's technically not accurate, you could say you're, sober from whatever, sober from opioids, sober from alcohol, or, abstinent from those things, if you want to be more specific. But I mean, I personally believe that you can say that you're sober, because sober doesn't mean that you have no psychoactive substances in your system. Sober is much more vague than that, in the fact that you're not intoxicated. So if you basically function normally on something like cannabis daily, or your, other medications daily, then you're sober. And I'm going to get more into that once I start to talk about the presentation I did around sobriety. But yeah, that's the main word I wanted to talk about. And, when it comes to other words, like, obviously derogatory words like junkie and crackhead, just don't fucking use those. Just don't look. If those are the types of words you're looking to use, you have a problem with the person that they are. Yeah, so if you're using those types of words, or even just like referencing someone's problematic behavior to like demonize some of their actions, like for example, if someone's like being a racist piece of shit, they are probably just a racist piece of shit, and it has nothing to do with their substance abuse. I want people to stop making those associations where, like, for example, this morning on Instagram. So anyway, there's this clip of this, I guess, reality TV show, like talent type contest thing that I wasn't aware of that existed, but it has Rick Ross and I think Offset and some people that I basically don't pay attention to. But it's a clip, and I'm gonna like try to like stitch it together in this video so that you can see what the fuck happened.
Just Ricky, you got me for the whole night. Baby, we gon' get it right. Oh yeah, I don't like no weedish. Just fuck me and just leave quick. Oh no, you think off with a boss, no worries at all. I can give you everything you need.
Your future bright, shorty, your future bright.
The music was bright.
Smartest move of her life.
I knew the song Boss Vibes that I did was going to get Ross's attention because I went to his past and I redid something and I put my own little twist to it and he liked it. My whole goal of this whole competition is to be the first lady of MMG. That's what I want. I can look this good and I can get a lot of attention, but I use my valedictorian mind skills and I make sure I take care of my business. Me and another person had the same beat.
I'm really curious who has the other beat she has the same beat. Oh, Kaya. Kaya.
So y'all be able to hear the difference in R&B and hip hop.
Shots fired.
Shots fired.
Kaya and I, we had the same beat. I wasn't trying to be mean or catty or anything. I just had to put it out there because I had to save myself.
Kaya, you better deliver, Kaya. I believe in you, Kaya.
Well, you can have my heart and all my love. I give you back cause I ain't too quick to judge. And I don't need nobody telling me that this ain't all the stare I can't see. So maybe we should run away. Run away. Find another place.
Yo.
They don't believe.
That wasn't the best platform for your voice.
Nope.
You have a unique voice. And Britt did sound better than yours.
They like mine's best.
So this person says, I don't think that any of these men is qualified to judge talent. This video screams of sexism and colorism. I agreed. I liked that comment. Some folks below also agreed. Nothing but sexism and colorism. For real, this was disgusting to watch. Too many layers to count. Amen. And then this person came in. I couldn't fucking like their comment because this is what they said. What kind of drugs are these misogynistic clowns on? The second competitor killed it. Okay, girl, please dial it back. We don't gotta bring drugs into this shit. They can be misogynistic clowns who perpetuate colorism without being on drugs. They probably are on drugs because it's fucking Rick Ross we're talking about. We're talking about rappers in a culture where, like many cultures or subcultures, there are staple drugs that people use and engage in. But that doesn't have anything to do with their cognitive functioning or them being a terrible ass person. So, when people bring up stuff like that, that is very stigmatizing. Even if they do have a substance use problem, just don't pin it on the drug. Like, yes, substances could absolutely amplify awful traits in people, but some people are just like that, period. They don't even have to have a problematic drug use, kind of issue going on. They can just be shitty people because that's how they've been socialized. So I don't care if this person who has abused meth is saying racist shit. Leave meth out of it, because there's plenty of people who utilize meth on the regular and aren't shitty. So, yeah, like that type of stuff, we gotta move away from that. If you're the type of person who does that and you are an advocate for drug policy reform, or you're an advocate for like access to harm reduction services, this is like a conflict of interest, using this type of language and painting drug users in this type of light, and like acting like drugs is what makes them horrible. Anyway, like, we don't need to be using this language that equates being shitty, doing like the isms of like sexism, racism, colorism, whatever, to someone's drug use patterns of any sort, whether they have them or not. Like, like, it's already that like a lot of this shit, a lot of this language stems from anti-blackness and other forms of racism, like crackhead, and this ridiculous rhetoric of like PCP making people like completely chaotic and weirdly superhuman, and it's other like mythical, completely unscientific shit about these drugs, that we often associate with these groups of people, because these groups of people are Black, and the media has like constantly shown like the most chaotic, out of control people on substances, and be like, this is what meth does, this is what heroin does, this is what PCP does. And they said that shit about cannabis, and we all know that shit's not true by now. So can we stop believing that about PCP, meth, or heroin, like losing your teeth and shit, and even crack babies, like that's a myth. Like, we like don't try to like like, people have like advocated so hard for cannabis and all that because we found out that all of the propaganda and science around it was completely skewed, sometimes actually completely just false. Like, that is the case with any of the drugs that we've been told are quote unquote bad. So the language around it is inherently fucked up, because it's that way on purpose, so that they could have a reason to be like, we're banning this for your own good, because look at what it does to people. It makes your white daughters hang out with Black men and like sleep with them, because Black people are dirty and terrible and shady, and they're always scheming, and they commit crimes, and they use these substances, and then you're gonna fall into a life of decadence and crime, because all these other like weird racialized falsehoods about what drugs actually do. So if you've let go of the lies about cannabis and reefer mania and all of that, please let go of the lies of meth, crack, heroin, and PCP. And that's just to name the ones I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's other ones, like the fucking synthetic cathinone zombies, like bath salts or whatever. Oh my God. Like, the plant itself, like its plant-based derivative, is basically like caffeine. And yes, synthetic cathinones are much more potent than, just like any synthetic version of drugs tend to be much more potent than its natural precursor, because you can extract the active ingredient and leave all the other stuff out. So yes, synthetic cathinones are more potent than the cat plant itself, but the cat plant itself is still considered Schedule 1 And it's associated with North Africans and Middle Easterners. And what do we feel about brown people? Good things don't come to mind when we think about brown people in the United States, thanks to 9/11 and a lot of the propaganda around that. But anyway, like, you know, cat itself, chewing cat, the leaves, is just like consuming caffeine or any other plant-based stimulant where, you know, it has like a stimulating property to it, like the bark of like yohimbe, you know, or like yerba mate, I forget whatever, you know, if yerba is a plant, or whatever, wherever that comes from, but like that is caffeinated. Like lots of teas are caffeinated. Like I was drinking, this was, what was this shit? This wasn't matcha. This was, some type of mushroom, maca. It's maca root, I think. And maca root has stimulating properties, you know, but anyway, like it's heavily misunderstood, and that is not by accident. You know, we exaggerate certain effects of it, and we'll be like, oh my God, all these people are just chewing the fucking cat. They're zombies. They're like slaves to this, you know, to this plant drug. It's so dangerous. People are addicted to it. How much coffee do y'all drink though? Like how much coffee do you drink? If someone is just, you know, chewing cat all day long, but you have like 3 cups of coffee a day, maybe more, like, or you use other type of stimulants to get yourself through the day because you got a lot of work to do, you're on your feet a lot or some shit, like you got to focus heavily. But we're sitting here being like, oh my God, things like cat or coca or like, you know, any other type of stimulant is scary. And it's just like, well, I mean, we're all probably using something to get through the day. And the fact that the majority of us are using these substances without issue, and it's in fact enhancing our ability to do what it is we want to do, whether that is, you know, be productive, but in our standards and definitions of productive, if that means like, you know, improving mental health, if that means enhancing certain pleasurable experiences, like we're all fucking doing it in one way or another. And most of these drugs don't have any unique properties that make them way worse than something else. A lot of times that shit's exaggerated. You know, problematic drug use, chaotic drug use is more of a mental health issue than it is issue of the type of drug that's being consumed, and also really a societal issue. Like people like this need to be highly escapist in nature is probably some sort of indication of what we have to do day to day sucking. And so we go extra hard on the pleasurable shit, you know, like when we have the time to do that. And that means, you know, like binge drinking on the weekends or whenever you have the time off, like all of that shit might be indicative of like, damn, the work week sucks ass. It took a lot out of me. So it's time to go ham right now until I have to go back to doing the bullshit that puts me in a like very bad headspace. And not saying that everybody like who likes to enjoy substances is like self-medicating in a way, but I think that, you know, if we feel like we're seeing addiction more than we're seeing, you know, like problematic use more than we're seeing people responsibly enjoying substances or, you know, responsibly using substances for whatever reason that they're using it for, it's usually a failure of society to be able to have resources for these people to thrive, you know. And this is why I want to talk about the recovery, you know, program and kind of like how we view this stuff, because we want to like ostracize people with addiction problems and perpetuate this myth that it's a choice, like as if, you know, doing the drug once suddenly making that choice to do the drug once now spiraled you into this habitual pattern of using this drug to the point where you spiraled into not being able to like function. That is not how drugs work. And we need to stop making it seem like it was like a one-time choice of like a bad choice, a mistake that was made that is your fault, and now you have this problem. Because that's just not how addiction works. That's not how anything works. And, you know, it's kind of being like, oh, you have diabetes, you shouldn't have had that ice cream. Having that ice cream was a choice, and now you have diabetes. Shouldn't have fucking made, you know, like, because people are just like, how about don't do illegal drugs? And I'm like, well, the system is completely arbitrary. Like, they're illegal because someone decided that they should be illegal. There's no reason that they should be illegal anyway. And to tell someone to not use their drug of choice that might be most beneficial to them because it's illegal is ridiculous. The danger comes from it being illegal, so they can't access reliably, you know, basically lab quality substances. In this context, I'll use the word clean, because if you have an impure product, that could actually have severe health consequences, you know. So in talking about the drug itself from a scientific standpoint, like, yes, it can be clean or, you know, impure, but that's not how we should talk about people. But being like, yeah, maybe you just shouldn't be doing those drugs. I'm like, well, those drugs might be highly beneficial for someone, but someone arbitrarily decided that they shouldn't be accessible because racism or classism or whatever. So I want to now move on to person first language, which I didn't mean to ramble so much about the word clean, but I'm going to quickly go over person first language, and then we'll get into the main presentation, the Psychoactives for Plebs presentation about sobriety, and that will be a separate video. So be on the lookout for that on the YouTube channel. All right, so once again, I want to reference the Harm Reduction Coalition's website, because basically everything you ever need to know is here to a degree. I mean, the Harm Reduction Coalition, at least in the United States, is probably like the most prominent and most active and most like just like size-wise largest harm reduction related movement. And you know, it's reliable. I work with these people from time to time. It'd be nice if I, you know, could have a job with them, but they decided that that's not a good fit because I don't speak Spanish. So anyway, you know, part of our language in speaking about destigmatizing drug use is related to person first language. And what that means, actually, let's talk a little bit about what's here on this site. So like how we stigmatize people. This is a really good list. I feel like I've already covered a lot of this just in my ramblings. Basically, it says pathologizing drug use and patronizing people who use drugs, blaming people who use drugs and imposing our own moral judgments, criminalizing people who use drugs, creating fear around people who use drugs, which serves to isolate them. And, you know, I feel like we've touched on that one way or another. I encourage you to go to their website and look at that yourself if you want. It's under the harm reduction basics in their website. But here it says we use person first language. A person is a person first, and behavior is something that can change. Terms like drug addict or user imply someone is something instead of someone. So basically, if you've been to my website, which you probably haven't, like, nobody goes to my website where it like says everything about me and what I've done and what I'm doing. But it also says it now on my Instagram. I occasionally change my bio. I only get so many characters to try to like list the types of content that people will see when they add me out of the blue half the time. Like, I really can't understand why some people add me based on what I'm seeing on their page. But maybe there's a lot of closet people who use drugs who are looking for someone that's advocating for them while they live an entirely different life in the public eye. So, you know, maybe they just like low-key align with everything, but fear, like completely rational fear, because of the way we stigmatize people who use drugs, you know, don't put their drug use or political views or social views on display. But yeah, I already said it a few times. People who use drugs, it's abbreviated PWUD. It's on my website. It's in my bio oftentimes, because you don't want to call someone necessarily an addict or a drug user or something that just makes it seem like that is who they are. That's it. They are just that. They're a user. They're an addict. You know, this is language that we use in referencing people who use drugs. You know, in harm reduction specifically, like it can be applied to other areas of like social justice and stuff. I wouldn't recommend it just because every movement might want to represent themselves differently. And, you know, for example, if you have autism or something, like maybe the disabled community or however they identify themselves don't want to be considered people who have autism. I've been told that before by people with autism. And like, it's up to them. It's up to the individuals who like, whose lived experience it is to kind of like define the language around it. So don't necessarily blanketly apply this to everything, but this is definitely an important concept in harm reduction. If there are people who, you know, are addicts, like because they want to refer to themselves as addicts, maybe they, you know, have reclaimed the word in some sense, like they want to use that to describe themselves, like not telling anybody that they can't. But for someone on the outside identifying someone experiencing, you know, the drug use, calling them an addict is out of line. Someone, if they wanted to call themselves an addict, it's like, you know, us in the queer community, a lot of us call ourselves fags or dykes or whatever, because we've reclaimed the word, you know, we're allowed to do that. Even some trans folks, they have reclaimed the word tranny. Like that's for them to call themselves and not anybody else. But I just wanted to stress the importance of person first language, especially in reference to the people who are using drugs, and not necessarily to yourself if you're like describing your own experience. But I think there's a lot of people who don't get that right and unintentionally stigmatize the folks that they claim to be advocating for. So if you're advocating for like syringe exchange programs to be accessible, or even what are they called? Injection sites, you know, safe places for people to shoot up or do those types of things, because the real danger is not necessarily in the activity of injecting something, like the drug itself, but like having no safe way to do so. You know, it puts them more in danger if they can't like see what they're doing, hit the vein properly, or they're rushing and can't measure. They already have potentially impure substances, so like tons of things can go wrong. There's a lot of variables. So safe injection sites are a form of harm reduction, and in Switzerland, they have legal heroin in the context of like their maintenance programs are allowing heroin users users of heroin, if we wanted to use the person first language there. I don't see heroin users as a problem. I mean, like, it's I use opioids and have used opioids and will again use opioids. It's just not something I use constantly. But anyway, so like they have these people who are in these maintenance programs. If they, if their addiction stems from heroin use, they give them heroin. And these people are like, just like, we might go to the bar or like whatever from time to time, we get our fix and go home or some shit. Like, they go get their heroin and they have jobs and do like normal ass shit. They just go get their heroin and it's, clean heroin, and you don't have to deal with all of the like street bullshit because it's like available in a place where they're allowed to use it. And for the people who might still be technically on the streets using heroin, they have sharps disposals for these people. They have it in their porta potty, like in their bathroom, in their public bathrooms. Like, they actually have public bathrooms, like in the United States. Like, even if you are not a houseless person, you can't fucking use the bathroom in a public space usually. Like, for example, here in New York City, like, sometimes you're on the train for fucking ever, and by the time you get off somewhere, like, there's nowhere where you can go in and use the bathroom unless like a store is nice enough to let you in and use their bathroom. And right now during COVID, it's even worse. Nobody wants you in their space. If you're a taxi cab driver or like any of those rideshare drivers, like, these people are in their cars all day where they're supposed to piss and shit, But in a place like Switzerland, they have public bathrooms. And they don't care if a person goes to shoot up in the public bathroom. They have a sharps disposal in the fucking public bathroom because they know that people are going to do that. And they'd rather have a safe disposal for it so there aren't just needles on the ground and shit. They'd rather it be in the right receptacle so that it's not a danger to people now. Like, the response of illegal heroin in Switzerland was to rising HIV infection rates, I believe. So they were recognizing that, damn, people are getting all these, communicable diseases because of this substance use. Maybe they're using like these unclean needles, or, people are coming in contact with unclean needles and they are contracting disease. But if we just give them a safe place to use this stuff, which provides them with all of the resources that are clean and all of the resources that are controlled, in the same way that in a medical setting, you get a vaccine or some shit, stuff is sterile. You're not like getting a shot in your arm while sitting next to like a subway grate, or in a McDonald's bathroom or some shit. Like, you are in a sterile, safe environment with controlled doses of the shit that you are receiving, even if we're not talking about a vaccine and we're talking about a psychoactive substance, like when you are going into surgery and they give you morphine. So anyway, person first language, adapt it as much as you can. Like, I know that there's just some things that we might say that is not quite person first language, but like, some people are still using extremely outdated terms like addict and stuff, or, worse, fucking junkie and crackhead and all that shit. So that's enough on that topic. I'm going to get into the presentation, and please watch that because I'm going to talk about what is sobriety, like what it actually is. We've already talked about all this language that we should move away from. And sobriety, being sober, is the language we should be using, but we also need a much more unified understanding of what is actually sobriety, like the state of being. What is sobriety? Is that drug free? Is that, whatever, like, what is it? So that's going to be coming up next. And you know, people voted very heavily for that topic. So fucking watch the video.